Drop a group of healthy people into a toxic environment. Do they hold on to their character, or does the situation eventually corrupt them? In the summer of 1971, Stanford professor Philip Zimbardo set out to find a definitive answer. The research team placed a simple classified ad in the local newspaper. They offered college students $15 a day to participate in a 2-week study of prison life. From dozens of applicants, they selected 24 young men, evaluated to be psychologically stable. With a coin flip, half were assigned to be guards and the other half prisoners. They were sent into a mock prison built in the basement of the psychology building. The researchers wanted to create a neutral testing ground. If these students turned vicious toward one another, it would suggest that human morality is dictated almost entirely by our surroundings. To make the simulation feel real, researchers systematically stripped the prisoners of their identities.
They wore uncomfortable smocks, were chained at the ankle, and referred to only by numbers. The guards were equipped with their own tools of authority. They wore khaki uniforms, carried batons, and wore mirrored sunglasses to prevent humanizing eye contact. The experiment began with a shock. Real local police arrested the prisoners at their homes, charging them with armed robbery. They were processed at a precinct before being delivered to the university basement. The situation deteriorated rapidly. By day 2, the prisoners staged a rebellion. The guards responded by blasting the inmates with fire extinguishers, stripping them naked, and forcing them to use buckets as toilets. Within 36 hours, the first prisoner suffered a mental breakdown and was released. The cruelty intensified until the 5th day, when a visiting researcher named Christina Maslach saw the guards forcing inmates to wear bags over their heads. After confronting Zimbardo about the lack of oversight, he shut the operation down on day 6. For the researchers, the rapid collapse into sadism proved their hypothesis. The oppressive roles had consumed the participants. In his later book, The Lucifer Effect, Zimbardo argued that good people are often helpless against a bad situation. This narrative became a staple of psychology textbooks. For decades, the 6-day descent into madness was taught as proof of our highly malleable nature. That narrative has recently fallen apart. Historians like Rutger Bregman and a new wave of psychologists dug into the Stanford archives and found details that challenged the study's validity. Audio recordings from the experiment reveal the researchers acting less like neutral observers and more like film directors. The experiment's warden is actually caught on tape pressuring the guards to be tougher and more active in their roles. The guards later admitted they were largely faking it. One of the most brutal guards revealed he was intentionally mimicking a warden he saw in a movie. Even the specific abusive tactics they used, like placing bags over inmates' heads, were suggested to the researchers beforehand by a prison consultant. These college students were responding to demand characteristics. They picked up on exactly what the researchers wanted to see and delivered a performance to help the scientists achieve their desired results. The abuse in that basement was a directed theatrical performance orchestrated by the experimenters. Even without the coaching, the experiment suffers from a massive flaw in its starting line: selection bias. In 2007, researchers decided to test Zimbardo's original recruitment process. They ran 2 different newspaper ads side by side. One used Zimbardo's exact wording, asking for volunteers for a psychological study of prison life. The other simply asked for volunteers for a generic psychological study. When they measured the personality traits of the respondents, those who volunteered specifically for the prison study scored significantly higher in aggression, authoritarianism, and narcissism. Those same volunteers scored significantly lower in empathy and altruism compared to the generic study group. By putting the word prison in the advertisement, Zimbardo filtered for a group of individuals who already carried high aggression traits before the experiment even began. Today, the Stanford prison experiment exists in 2 different realities. In pop culture and legal defense strategies, it is still cited to argue that environments excuse evil behavior. In the academic world, the study has been largely discarded. When psychologists attempted a partial replication in 2002, the BBC prison study, they avoided coaching the guards, and the participants simply figured out how to manage a non-abusive environment. Zimbardo's work is now viewed alongside other mid-century research, like Stanley Milgram's experiments at Yale. These studies operated in an era where generating dramatic headlines often took priority over ethical rigor.
The scientific community eventually realized that the foundation of these famous experiments was deeply flawed. The public fallout from the Stanford simulation forced a total overhaul of research standards. It became the primary catalyst for the birth of modern research ethics. Because of the harm inflicted on these students, American universities established institutional review boards. Today, any experiment involving human subjects must pass through these committees to ensure no one is put in physical or psychological danger. Professional organizations now use rigid frameworks demanding informed consent and a prohibition against psychological distress. They also mandate rigorous post-experiment debriefing procedures to ensure participants leave without lasting emotional trauma. The events at Stanford demonstrate our willingness to conform to the expectations of authority and highlight why scientific power itself requires strict oversight.